So a long-awaited independent MMORPG is finally out, and suffice to say, it's a total catastrophe of a game that was so bad I had to refund it, which is something I normally don't do even for games I don't fully enjoy, but can still see that there are merits in them that may prove the games to be enjoyable for people who may not have the same taste as me. The Day Before, however, is so bad I cannot be confident in saying that there are any merits or redeemable qualities to it. I am unsure if anyone can possibly enjoy it in the current state, even as an early access game that feels more like it's a skeletal structure of a game rather than a process of ideas that has come to life. In fact, The Day Before is not even a MMO or an open world survival game as advertised previously, which is mind-boggling and something we'll look at later in the video. The user interface leaves a lot to be desired. Basic menu design such as a scroll bar or the ability to filter by category on either the menu or in-game inventory is completely absent. The UI for displaying your injuries, your ammo count, and even when ADSing just leaves a lot to be desired. I'm going to mostly ignore the server issues here because it was launch day. There's a lot of people trying to get in, servers kept going down or being taken off to accommodate the spiking populations, which is more than understandable. What I am not okay with is that there seemed to be little thought given to mitigate the effects of such a busy day a developer studio should have expected. If you were in the middle of briefly exploring the so-called open world of The Day Before, or had just equipped your tutorial items and the server you were in had to shut down for whatever reason, or you got kicked out, you lost literally everything. Character creation leaves a lot to be desired. I think even New World or Saints Row had a much better character customization than The Day Before, and that's honestly saying something here. The sound design is one of the least pleasant things in the game I've ever experienced, and this is a big thing because audio contributes to a variety of things, including the tactile feel of the game, how satisfying gunplay could be in this case, the enjoyment of the open world around you, such as the ambience. Unfortunately, everything sound-wise falls short, whether we're talking about the gargled sounds of the infected zombies, the constant alarms ringing throughout the landmarks you have to go through, the sound effects of the weapons are lackluster, and so on. A lot of the so-called voice acting seems to be AI voices, or at absolute best, really bad writing combined with little direction given to whichever voice actor voiced the dialogues. For sure, the player character's voice C is AI.
Cardio. Now I get it.
Alright, the first rule is cardio. Now I get it.
Alright, the first rule is cardio. Now I get it.
The lack of intonation, the lack of pauses, the lack of any game credits given to any voice actor, and the use of strange vocabulary, like vocal organs in English, all point to AI voices being lazily inserted into the game. In terms of graphics or settings, the game is not at all optimized in the slightest, and your best chance of maybe bearing with the game for more than a couple of hours is to keep the default settings. FPS issues were abound, as were client memory leak issues. This is also the first game for me where turning on NVIDIA DLSS actually made everything look worse, which is an astonishing feat and indicative of how little work went into the back end of the game. And I say this not to be mean, but because of how extremely small this supposed open world MMO is. Once you load into a server that doesn't seem to be able to host over 30-some people, you are given 3 closed instances to play with. The first instance is the Woodbury Middle School Shelter, where you can interact with the tutorial NPCs and the merchant NPCs or other players sort of lounging around. The second instance is your own housing instance, or plot of land, where while it may look spacious with its own lake and mountain, there's only an incredibly small space on this plot of land allotted for you to actually decorate or furnish. The housing editor is nothing special, and again, some of the lack of UI work shows when you're attempting to decorate or go into build editor mode. The third instance is of course New Fortune City, where after walking around uninterrupted for a little over an hour, you've basically seen everything there is to see. The exploration of the interiors and buildings also leads to nothing. The loot locations are also quite strange, such as the car doors being searchable, but not the trunks or seats. Nothing feels memorable. Nothing is memorable apart from the array of bugs you may encounter. The interaction of checking the map, or even your digital journal by having your character crouched and open up the menu, make exploration itself just tedious or unengaging, as all you need to do is place yourself on the roof of a car if you're worried about being potentially attacked by a zombie, as the apocalyptic monsters that brought down humanity can't figure out a car roof. Speaking of the so-called open world, a lot of the space in the city is actually taken up by inaccessible areas or blockaded roads that force you to make unnecessary detours, making exploration just boring. As I alluded to earlier in this video, the map feels incredibly empty and devoid of any meaningful fights or interactions with either the zombies or players. A lot of player interactions are muted, such as the lack of an in-game proximity voice chat, which I think in cases like DayZ or Tarkov can create great gaming moments between players, especially during firefights. The quests, missions, and the rewards offered are also unsatisfying in both doing and getting them. The touted crafting in the game's prior advertisements is nowhere to be seen. Simply just buying weapons and attachments to needlessly to go to a workbench to fit these attachments is the only thing I can see as evidence of some sort of crafting system or assembly system. There's no gather X amount to craft Y and upgrade to Z. None of that. It just ultimately feels like in regard to the gameplay systems or combat elements, the day before devs looked at Escape from Tarkov, The Division, and Call of Duty DMZ and tried to half-ass some of their ideas in an Unreal Engine 5 blender. The combat, if you're lucky enough to even find one of the other 31 players in a server or even just some zombies, is unsatisfying and lacks impact on every single level, from the weapons to the reactivity of the enemies and environment around you. There is no melee option as well for whatever reason, whether that's shoving or punching something, or even melee weapons. How an MMO, much less a zombie survival game, doesn't offer melee options is just baffling to me. Everything just feels awful to interact with. I just cannot stress enough how much the game just feels awful in general. The early access blurb on the day before Steam page notes that the developers want to put another 6 to 8 months into the day before during their early access phase at minimum. But I think just like the Lord of the Rings Gollum game and Bethesda's Redfall, I don't think any amount of work or investment into trying to improve the day before will yield anything better than its iteration's max limit on how good it can be. It'd be like trying to build an entire mansion on new soil with absolutely no foundation, and perhaps a better option would be to just completely do it over again. On top of all these poor qualities and issues, the day before's makers falsely advertised their product as an open-world MMO in multiple videos that have now since apparently been taken down by the developers on their YouTube channel, and in various information blurbs that still exist, by the way. Accusations of false advertisement led to developers temporarily closing their Discord server citing toxicity. At best, the day before is a third-person extraction shooter that fails to meet anyone's expectations and will undoubtedly be looked at as one of 2023's worst games. But where did it all go wrong, and what are the chances of the day before making some sort of No Man's Sky comeback? There were many red flags that heralded the coming of the day before. First, a supposed trademark conflict with a calendar app, also called the day before, which led to the takedown of the game from the Steam store pages. Then, word of a volunteer force of what essentially is a quality and assurance team made rounds saying they were not being paid, which is crazy considering the fact the day before took out a New York City Times Square advertisement. And it seems like the company, Fntastic, made an incredibly strange 38-second video that sort of dismissed paying their QA volunteers with a really weird description defining what volunteerism is.
Whatever you do in life, you do it willingly or unwillingly. If you do it willingly, it becomes a heaven. If you do it unwillingly, it becomes a hell. Fntastic culture is based on the idea of volunteering. Being a volunteer means that you willingly take part in working for a common cause.
The idea of volunteering comes from our own experience and aspiration, or in other words, to become a person who says yes to life. Volunteering means that in every action you take, you bring a certain pleasantness.
Another big red flag was apparently Fntastic's game development history, in which they were trying to transition from isometric games or just non-MMO games to a entirely ambitious MMO, and apparently even for their previous games, they have been accused by those games' player bases of abandoning development and their communities entirely, which is a bit worrisome for those who continue to believe in the day before. Accusations of the game's developers straight up ripping off of other games' trailers, promotion material, and gameplay also made rounds, and definitely the similarities or exact likenesses are really uncanny.
The Day Before offers a uniquely reimagined journey into post-apocalyptic MMO open-world survival.
Rockstar have tried to reimagine the open-world game in a number of ways.
The open world of The Day Before is beautiful and richly detailed.
The game world is beautiful, massive, and diverse.
The weapons, which can be modified, are made with maximum realism to ensure that combat remains deep and engaging at all times.
Make combat deep and engaging at all times.
Each weapon boasts unique characteristics, as well as realistic reload and recoil mechanics.
Each weapon has unique characteristics, with realistic reload and recoil.
Things got so bad that Fntastic posted the following statement on Twitter very recently where they said, "Please don't accuse us of scamming. That's not true. We didn't take a penny from anyone." The company even cited the fact that they're even going through a game publisher to make it look like the whole thing is legitimate. But another strange video that showcased their developer team working also sort of explains the perhaps ineffective workflow and also why the game publisher they went through, called Mytona Fntastic, seemed to have little involvement in the delay decisions for the game and also the marketing for the game.
Today we are going to show you our office at Fntastic and how we work on the day before, the most anticipated game on Steam Digital Store.
Right now we're talking with our super partners, Mytona.
Yeah, Mytona founders, Alexey and Afanasy Ushnitsky.
Top wish list in this team is like a real amazing. It will be number one of game of favorite, I think.
We feel tremendous support in our social media and Discord. We read all the comments and reviews, even the negative ones.
So yeah, it's a really bad game with a really bizarre history behind it. At the very least, I would highly advise to you guys watching this video that you don't yet buy the day before for $40 until you see massive improvements during their early access phase, because admittedly, there are reasons why people were hyped about this game. There were some cool concepts, there were some cool ideas, but unfortunately, the game didn't deliver on any of these or what they had advertised. If I had to give a rating for the day before, as I do for other games I reviewed, I'm going to have to give it a 0 out of 10. Thanks for watching, and if you want to stay up to date with lore videos, game reviews, and so on, definitely subscribe to the channel. Until next time, stay safe and have fun.